Hey guys, welcome to the 7.5 notes. I am homesick today, kind of last minute, so instead of having a work day today, we're going to switch it up and you guys will have a work day tomorrow instead. It's just easier while I'm gone for us to go ahead and stick with like an original lesson, and this one's not too bad because it's actually going to be a bunch of shortcuts you can use when you are finding products, but remember that product, that really just means multiplication. Okay, sum means add, product means multiplication. So when we're multiplying polynomials, these are going to be some shortcuts you can use. And there's a few things I want you to focus on. Number one is how to identify each shortcut. And number two is how each shortcut works so that we can actually use it as a shortcut. So the first one is conjugates. And what you're going to notice as you look at these first three problems here at the top is all of them have the same numbers in both parentheses, except the sign in the middle is flip-flopped. So the part of the pattern that we're going to start with is you have the same numbers inside parentheses, except the sign in the middle is opposite. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that up there for a second, and then I'm going to zoom in and do the first problem with you in just a second. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do the box method on the first one. I will FOIL on the second one, and then on the third one, we'll try and use the shortcut. The first thing you're going to do is go ahead and draw yourself a box. And then you're going to put x minus 7 on one side and x plus 7 on the other side. And you're going to draw a row or a column in between x and 7 on each side. Then you're going to multiply these together. X times x is x squared. X times 7 is 7x. X times negative 7 is negative 7x. And negative 7 times 7 is negative 49. Then, hopefully you kind of remember this, you have to add these x's that are in the diagonal together. So what happens when you add 7x and negative 7x? You get 0. So I don't even need x to be part of my answer. My answer is just x squared minus 49. Okay, so we're looking for a pattern here. So keep what happened on that one in mind. And we're going to go ahead and focus on the next one. Except for this time, I'm going to use the FOIL method. Remember that FOIL stands for first, outside, inside, and last. So for F, first, I multiply the first two in both parentheses. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. Then outside is 2x and negative 3, the two terms that are closest to the outside. Well, 2x times negative 3, 2 times negative 3 is going to be negative 6. There's only one x this time, not squared. I stands for the inside 2. 3 times 2x is positive 6x. And then the last two, 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. And just like on the box method, you have to add the 2 in the middle together. But negative 6x plus 6x is 0x. So your answer is 4x squared minus 9. Now, let's look at these first two and decide, is there a pattern here? Well, first of all, on both of them, the numbers in the middle added to 0. So that's the first part of the pattern, is that the middle, I'm just going to call it the middles cancel. So the two terms in the middle cancel. And what you have left is actually this first number squared. So x squared is x squared. And 7 squared is 49. 2 squared is 4. X squared is x squared. And 3 squared is 9. So what you're going to have is perfect squares. It's always going to be the squares subtracted. And it is always going to be subtraction because one of them is always going to be a plus and one of them is going to be a minus for this rule. So if I wanted to use this rule for this third one, I would multiply 3x times itself, or 3x squared, which is 3 times 3 is 9, and x times x is x squared. Then I would multiply 5 times 5, that's 25. And they're always going to be subtracted in between. So that's how you can use the shortcut. Again, this one is called conjugates, and it's a special way of saying that those middle terms are going to cancel out. So really, it's like you could do FOIL, but without the O and the I, because those cancel out. All right, let's talk about another one. The next one is called a squared binomial. And what that means is you have a parentheses squared. And you do not just square both of them like we did on the last one. What you have to do is that squared means you multiply something by itself. So we're going to cross off the squared and multiply each parentheses times itself. Okay, so for this one, both parentheses are exactly the same. Okay, go ahead and make sure you have that written down for your pattern so that you know when to use this one. One thing I'm going to add is that it starts as parentheses squared. Now go ahead and make sure you have the whole thing before we start the first problem. Okay, so for our first problem over here, I'm going to use the box method again like I did on the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my box and write 7x minus 2 and 7x minus 2. Like this. But you'll notice that this time they're exactly the same. The signs aren't different. Okay, so now I'm going to multiply. 7 times 7 is 49. And there's 2 x's, so that would be x squared. 7 times negative 2 is going to be negative 14, x. 7 times negative 2 again is going to be negative 14, and there's 1x. And then negative 2 times negative 2, be careful, because 2 negatives multiply to a positive 4. Then, just like we did above, you have to add the 2 in the diagonal together. But negative 14 plus negative 14 isn't 0 this time. It's actually negative 28. And then the 4 stays at the end. And the 49x squared stays in the middle. Okay, I'm going to try the one next to this, but by foiling instead this time. You can always pick whichever method you want. I'm just trying to make sure we do one of each type for everybody. So the first two for the next problem, 2x times 2x is 4x squared. Then 2x times 5 is 10x. Then 5 times 2x is 10x. And lastly, 5 times 5 is 25. And just like with the box method, you have to add these two in the middle together. 10 plus 10 is 20. And I'm just going to kind of come out and say that usually this one isn't everybody's favorite shortcut because it's still kind of a long shortcut, but it does save you a little bit of time. Okay, so there's my two answers. What I'm going to notice about this is the first number got multiplied by itself to get this one. The second number got multiplied by itself to get the last number. And in the middle, you ended up adding the same thing twice, both on that problem and on this one. So what it's going to be is the first number squared. And then in the middle, it's going to be 2 times the first number times the second number. And that one is going to be sometimes positive, if that's a positive number, and sometimes negative. And then the last number is always going to be positive. You'll notice both these ended up being pluses. And it's going to be the second number squared at the end. Here's how we could use that shortcut to avoid showing our work on the other ones. And it's not that I want you to not show work, it's that I want you to understand how patterns work. So for example, on this last one, I'm going to do the first number squared first. So 4x squared. 4 times 4 is 16, and x times x is x squared. Then I'm going to do 2 times the first number times the second number. So 2 times 4x times negative 3. 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. And then I'm going to square the last number, and I'm always going to end up adding this. Now, you'll notice that the one up here ended up being subtracted because I got negative 24. So 3 squared is 9. And that's it. That's the shortcut. You'll notice that this one and the last one, you squared the first two here and here. But on conjugates, there was no number in the middle. And on this one, you just multiplied them together and doubled that number. All right, we've got one last one. This one is usually a little bit easier. These are called trinomials, and they are set up as x plus something and x plus something. So there is never a number in front of x. And that's the main, most important part of this, is that all of the x's have a 1 in front. So you could rewrite them all as 1x. So let's go ahead and try the first two like we did on the others, and then I'll talk to you about what the pattern actually is. Again, I'm going to start with box method on the first one, and then I'll switch to FOIL for the second one, just so we're getting extra multiplying practice also. So here's my box. X plus 8 goes on one side. X minus 3 goes on the other side. And then I'm going to multiply them together. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 8 times x is 8x. And 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. Then I'm going to add the 2 in the middle like this. 8 plus negative 3 is 5. And then 8 times negative 3, or sorry, the negative 24, sorry, stays at the end. And the x squared stays in the beginning. And that's your answer. Okay, let's try it with foiling. F-O-I-L. Start with firsts. X times x is x squared. X times 4 is 4x. Since that's not negative, we'll put a plus in front. 7 times x is 7x. And 7 times 4 is 28. Then, just like with the box method, you add the 2 in the middle together. 4 plus 7 is 11x. And then you keep the 28 and the x squared. And that's your answer. Now, this one is my favorite pattern because you can skip so much work with it. The pattern is that it's always going to be x squared. And then you are going to add the two numbers from the parentheses together to get the x in the middle. So for example, 8 minus 3, or 8 plus negative 3 is 5. 7 plus 4 is 11. Because we added them together in the middle right here and right here, they always add to that number. Then the last number is always going to be the multiplication or the product of the two numbers. So for example, on this last one, it's always going to start with x squared. Then the number in front of x is always going to be these two numbers added together. So 10 plus negative 6 is 4. And the last number is always going to be those two numbers multiplied together. 10 times negative 6 is negative 60. And that is your pattern. So let's kind of recap what we've got going on here. Because on your assignment, it's going to ask you to identify which one it is. Conjugate, squared binomial, or trinomial. Conjugate is the one that had the same numbers except for the sign in the middle is opposite. Like all of these. Same numbers, opposite signs. Squared binomial is the one that has the parentheses squared. And trinomial is the one where there's no number in front of x on either of the parentheses. So this one, nothing's the same about the two parentheses. You just have no number in front of x. So for example, number 1, I noticed that they look the same except the sign in the middle is different. So that would be conjugate. The second one has the little power of 2. So that would be squared binomial. And then number 3, there's nothing really the same about it. So it would be a trinomial. And I'm going to go ahead and solve these first 3 on the assignment with you. And then let you guys try the other 12 on your own. So the first one I said was conjugate. And the pattern that we listed for conjugate was squares subtracted. So if I want to do number 1, I'm going to square 8x, which is 8 times 8 is 64, x squared. And I have to subtract 2 squared, which is 4. And that's it, guys. You're going to subtract the squares for conjugates, and that's it. Now, the next one is a squared binomial. Let's go back and look at that pattern. We said that this one was the first one squared and the second one squared, but in the middle, you multiply them together and double it. So 5x squared is 25x squared. 3 squared is 9. And in the middle, you're going to do 5x times 3 doubled. So 5x times 3 is 15x, times 2 is 30x. Then trinomial is the one where the number in the middle is where you add them, and number at the end is where you multiply them. Whoa, that was weird. So, x squared, and then you're going to add 3 and negative 5 for the middle one, and multiply 3 and negative 5 for the last one. So 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2x, and 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. So all I'm asking you to do is try the special products. If you can't do that, if you don't get the pattern, then go ahead and just use the box method or FOIL on all of them.